Are you parenting a child on the autism spectrum? Do you wonder what life will hold for them as they continue to grow and become an adult? Well, this is the show for you. Welcome, families. I'm Crystal Sanford of Thriving Special Families, your host here, where we offer insight, humor, and hope along your parenting journey. I am so glad to have our special guest today as we discuss being autistic and proud with Ayanna Davis. Hi, Ayanna.
Hi,
Thanks so much for being here today and sharing your story.
thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, parents, if you're new to Thriving Special Families, welcome. We are just so happy to have you here. We encourage you to like, share, and subscribe and comment about our show as we can continue to grow and share more supports for you as families. Always know as well that the information that is shared is for your informational purposes only. If you're in need of legal or medical advice, please do contact a professional in that area. So, again, today we're talking about being autistic and proud, and we have the really special honor of having Ayanna today. Ayanna is an autistic advocate. She's born and raised in Westchester County, New York. Along with having autism, she's also survived over 220 seizures. She lives with chronic illnesses and two autoimmune diseases. But Ayanna has not let that stop her from spreading her message of self love, joy, equality, diversity, inclusion, and autism awareness and acceptance through the arts. Ayanna is a children's book illustrator. She is the creator of 4 coloring books for girls of color. Ayanna is a designer. She's also a theater kid. She's been honored at the United Nations. She was given a proclamation making April 26th Ayanna's Day in Westchester County, New York. And also, Ayanna is a former choreographer, and she has trained over 100 students. So, Ayanna, amazing! You've done amazing things beyond, what people without any, neurodiversity have done. So, tell us a little bit more about your story. I really am someone who values story, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about your story and how you were able to become a model, an illustrator, all these wonderful things.
I've always been like different, but I always say this, like there was nothing wrong with me. I'm just different. So at a very young age, I'm sure my parents noticed that I wasn't good socially. People would speak to me and I would just walk away, or um, like they'd ask me a question and I wouldn't talk and I wouldn't speak to them. I would just go sit in the corner and draw because art
Mhm.
has always been and still is my biggest form of communication. So
Awesome.
I see like how it was missed because they're like she's just an artist, she's eccentric and she's just her own person. So and then people would always say like, oh well, maybe she's just shy, and I'm not
Mhm.
shy. I'm introverted, but I'm not shy. And
Okay.
they always kept me involved in some type of art. um when I was 7 years old, I started doing art shows, and then a few years later, that's when I got into the dance and back into the theater, the dance department of theater, the drama
Nice.
department of theater. So I've always been in some type of art. Like art actually saved my life. I don't know what my life would be without it
Mm,
because it's how I communicated, it's how I expressed myself. So
awesome.
they just always kept me with some type of like art form. Um, I I had a late diagnosis, I was in my 20s, so like
Mm,
people um they would always just say, "Oh, she has anxiety," or she has an attitude, and
mhm,
like with like especially like with Black women and women of color, we're
mhm.
not given very much grace. They're always just like she has an attitude, not thinking something else might be there.
Right.
So I was in the hospital for other things, and I wasn't connecting to my doctors. I wouldn't talk to my doctors, so they said, "Well, let's evaluate her." So they evaluated me. We sat down with my treatment team and my dad, of course, and they're like, "Yeah, she's on the spectrum." So that was that.
Wow. Wow. After 20 years, finally coming to that space where they were able to put a name for it, right? And put maybe a more appropriate name. That tell me how that changed your life after having actually the diagnosis of autism.
Well, at first, it it didn't change anything because I was like in denial. I was like, I'm not autistic. They don't know what they're talking about. But
Good. Okay. Oh,
I actually had to like come to terms with it. And once
yeah.
I did, it was like the most beautiful thing because I now understood myself. I now
Mm,
understood why I am the way I am, why I communicate the way I do, why sometimes I can't communicate, why I process information the way I process
mm,
information, why I have such strong like sensory issues and things like that. So
yeah.
like, wait, it wasn't what I wanted to hear, but it like saved me because I was just really at a low point where it was just like, why am I this way?
Mm,
Why am I like this?
mhm.
Black people don't know a lot about autism, and it often gets overlooked. They can see a child, like a white child, having the same traits as a black child, but
Yeah.
the black child is just deemed being bad and just
Sure.
not wanting to listen. So they don't really give them anything. When the white child, they say, oh well, maybe something is there. Let's see, let's try this out. Because even as like a child in elementary school,
Mhm.
I struggled socially, and kids kids are mean.
Oh,
I was bullied, and sometimes the teacher didn't even do anything. So it was just like, it was a relief because it was like, okay, well now you're on this new journey. Now you know who you are. So since you know who you are, you can now understand yourself better. Because I was experiencing a lot of self hate because I didn't understand myself, and now I love myself.
oh, amazing, amazing. I have to say, I'm sorry to hear about your experience in your childhood. And that was going to be one of my other questions. How was childhood different for you as a child? Now we know, being on the autism spectrum. But I have to say, it's hard to hear, but and it's unfortunately true that, research has shown that there has been a lag. There's been a lag in the communities of color when it comes to early identification of autism, really calling it what it is. And unfortunately for girls, same thing. Often, girls are seen as, like you said, maybe they have attention challenges or they're shy or, it's something else, never really considering autism because when people hear that word autism, they think that classic, Rain Man, like that's their point of reference.
Yes, like people like one day somebody did say to me, "Oh, you have autism?" I saw Rain Man, and I'm like, "Well, everybody with autism is not like Rain Man. Please
Oh,
remember, it's a spectrum." So that's what people forget. Like with me, even like functioning labels are harmful and dangerous because like being labeled high functioning, which I am, it can help you miss out on resources that you need
sure.
to better your quality of life. And also, you don't know what a person has to go through to achieve something that you might think is very small.
Yes.
Sometimes getting out of the bed every morning is hard.
Mhm.
So it's just like functioning labels are harmful, and I think that people need to understand that.
That is really powerful. And again, parents, if you're just joining us, welcome again to another episode of Thriving Special Families. Today, we are discussing being autistic and proud, and we are just diving into one woman's story, Ayanna Davis, of late diagnosis of autism and how she has been able to thrive in the midst of that. And Ayanna, you bring up a really good point that even functioning labels, because a lot of us are listening, are parents. A lot of my audience is autism parents like myself. I'm parenting a daughter who's on this spectrum. She's 10. And that was what we knew when she was identified early was high functioning. That's what they said, and we went with that. But that has been so many years ago now. Coming to see that, like you said, those functioning labels can be misnomers. They can really hinder your
Yeah.
child. And
And
I've
then
seen.
imagine being labeled low functioning. Like, how do you think that makes somebody feel? So
Oh yeah.
even
Oh,
when people go nonverbal, like nonverbal does not mean that you can't understand somebody, that you can't understand what people are saying about you. Nonverbal does not mean that you cannot communicate. It just
mhm.
literally means that either, some people are fully nonverbal.
Mhm.
Myself, I only have nonverbal episodes, but I'm still able to communicate. I can text, I can email, I can
Mm,
draw. So it's just like it's just verbally not being able to speak at the moment. But I think some people forget that, and they say things and they make
mhm.
judgments. So there
Yeah.
are a lot of there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like we've come a long way when it comes to autism, but there's still plenty of work to be done. What would you recommend as something that would be more appropriate in regards to discussing? Because at times we do need to discuss. And so, what I have used as I do my trainings with families, I talk about high needs. Some of our kiddos have higher needs than others, and I often refer to kiddos who are minimally speaking or they're non-speaking. So just means that they're not using words, but that doesn't mean that they are not communicating in another way. How does that ring true for you?
It's absolutely true because um, art, like I said, is my biggest form of communication. I may not always be able to verbally express myself, but I can sit down and I can draw you a picture. And that's what I did like as a child. That's how I communicated. That's how I let my parents know what I needed. And sometimes I wasn't even having a nonverbal episode. It's just sometimes it's very difficult to speak sometimes.
Mhm.
So find the way that your child communicates the best
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
which makes them comfortable because neurodivergent people, we have a lot of anxiety, so you don't want to try to force them to communicate in one
Mhm.
way and
Mhm.
just raise their anxiety. So with me, it's art, it's drawing. So
Mhm. That's great. I think I can't think of the name right now, but I know that there's a movie that's out there of a family, and this child really was and passionate about Disney movies, right? And so he had watched maybe every Disney movie and memorized like all the lines and everything, and the family began to embrace that, and so they used that and they used that language for the Disney movies as a way to communicate with that child. And I thought that was really neat. And that took a
yeah,
lot of,
that's pretty cool. There's a short about autism, I think by Pixar. I think it's called Float. I saw it so many times, but I don't know why I don't remember
uh,
the name of it. So things like that,
mhm.
like I love seeing like things like that. Me, I'm all about diversity and inclusion. Just because somebody's autistic don't mean that they can't do what a neurotypical person can do.
Yeah, that's great. That's so great. And you bring up the idea of neurodiversity, which is becoming more of a word on the forefront when it comes to research and discussing autism. Tell us what that means to you, neurodiversity.
It being different, like people with ADHD also fall under the neurodivergent, um, name and category, and neurodiversity is just showing. It's just another way of saying that there's diversity within the autism and ADHD community because of the different levels, um, of the disorder. So it's just another way to be more inclusive.
I like that. That's great. Anything that's promoting inclusion, we want to be about that. Um,
Yes.
yeah. Tell us a little bit about who have been your mentors or people who have inspired you throughout your life.
Um, as a child, it's really difficult for me to know because I always pulled back from people.
Mm,
So, but it's that like my mama when she was alive and my dad. So like growing up, they were always like the people that I ran to, and definitely um my mama's twin and my grandmother. Like those are the people that I sat under because I wouldn't go anywhere with anyone that I who wasn't family.
mm,
Even some people that were family, I wouldn't go anywhere with them. No offense to them. I have a really huge family, but
okay.
I stuck up under my grandmother a lot. So I learned a lot from her. She didn't let anybody bother me. So looking back on my childhood, I did pull back from a lot of people, and not purposely. It was just I just couldn't handle it. So being that I was really only around family, I would say family.
And that's beautiful, because unfortunately, everyone doesn't have that type of a supportive network in their own family. Like you said, especially in the Black communities, autism is not, everybody's not really well versed on it. It's not understood. And so the fact that you did have people in your family who supported you, who you could, feel comfortable around, that is wonderful. And we want to see that happen even more.
Yeah, they knew nothing about autism. They just knew that I was different. They knew I had some challenges.
Mhm.
But mostly it was like, oh, well, we think she's just shy, and they let me do all my artistic things. And
That's
like,
great.
so because like I don't like when people are like, well, how did your parents miss they didn't miss it, but we just didn't know what autism was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they knew that I was artistic. And that, like, as artists, we do our own things. Sometimes we want to be bothered, sometimes we don't. So
Mhm,
they're like, she's
mhm.
eccentric. So they supported me to the best of their ability and knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And I totally get that. And that's really one of the reasons why I started my business, where now in Sanford Autism Consulting, we support autism families in the educational side and helping them to get resources through school districts and whatnot. And a big impetus of that was when my daughter was identified with autism. And I could tell at 18 months that something was going on and potentially that it was autism. But that was only because I had been a speech pathologist by then, I think like 12 years or something. I'd worked with a lot of kiddos. I knew what it was about, but I knew that the average parent didn't. And I knew that the average parent wouldn't know how to secure services and supports. And so, my daughter was identified at 18 months. I got concerned. It took another 18 months before anybody would say it's autism. And like you said, they would say, oh, well, she looks at us. She's got eye contact. She's smart. It can't be autism. You're just, overactive parent, whatever. And her pediatrician, I tell this story, my daughter's pediatrician would not admit autism until she was 5. So, I mean, the school district identified and agreed at 3.5, but it took another year and a half before even her pediatrician would agree. So, I knew those struggles that I had encountered, and I had information. So, heaven forbid, parents who didn't have the information, I knew that they were struggling too. So, that's really a big piece of why I started my business soon after that. So, I understand. I understand your journey, and kudos to your family for just embracing you for who you were, regardless of a label. They knew.
Yeah, they're just like, just leave her alone. She's artistic.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. And look what you've done with that. It's amazing. How did you get into the writing, the illustrating piece? That I think that's really beautiful. Using that gift, and I tell parents this: if your kid on the spectrum has a thing, watch that thing, nurture that thing.
Yeah.
That thing could become their career in the future.
Yeah, I think sometimes the only reason they don't is because a lot of people who are autistic have special interests. So they're just like,
Mhm.
oh, it's just a special interest. It's not anything that'll go anywhere. So I think that's why some parents don't
Mhm.
really um, push their child and allow their child and help their child fulfill their dreams. But um, the illustrations is something I've always done. I was 3 years old, and my dad just took me for a ride because he said that, like, sometimes he just felt if I got some air that I would like
Mhm.
behave better, but he never said I was misbehaving. But he said we drove past a building with like all these windows, and he said when I got home I drew the building with the exact same number of windows, and he was like, "Oh my God!" And he told me that he kind of like freaked out, and he went back to the building with the drawing, and he was counting the windows. So like I've always drawn, and then when I was 7 years old, I started doing art shows,
Okay.
here in New York, and I enjoyed them, but it was still like the social demand of having to be social because
Ah,
people would be in my face and be like, "Oh my God, you're so talented," and I'd go run and hide behind my dad and
sure, sure.
um my aunt who is a painter. So
Mhm.
the illustration for the books. Okay, I a publisher reached out to me and we actually put out a calendar. And then she said, "Well, how would you like to do a book to match the calendar?" So that's when I did my first book. It's not in print now, but that's when
Mhm.
I did my first book. And then different people just started reaching out to me to do illustrations for them. And you know, it was like a word of mouth thing. When I first started, I had a really good literary agent. He
Okay.
doesn't do it anymore, but he was really good, and he was like nice. He was friendly, you know, because sometimes people can be like, you know, emotionalists.
Yeah.
And then they say that like autistic people have no emotions, but like I'm like very empathetic. I'm an empath. I'm very sensitive to other people's emotions.
Mhm.
But you know, that's how it started. And then I just, you know, started to do books with different authors. Some of the books never came out because, you know, like with anything, everything doesn't always work out.
Sure, sure.
But you know, I'm grateful for the opportunities I've been given that people considered me.
Yeah, amazing. Well, you've got so many talents, so broad reaching in the artistic realm that it's really cool to see how where that's taking you. So I have another question, and we have just a little bit more time together because I could really talk to you all day, really. Um, Always interested to hear and see because when you're parenting a child with autism, you're always thinking about the future. What's going to happen when they're an adult? How are they going to survive? Are they going to be on the couch with me for the rest of our life? Because you don't know. You don't know. So I'm always just interested in seeing the variety of adults and seeing what they've done, how they've been able to be successful and just have a life that is fulfilling. Um, so this is
Yeah, like people don't think that you can flourish. Like me, I'm not totally independent, because I have other illnesses and disorders. It kind of I don't like the word limit, but it kind of limits me. Like I can't cross the street by myself. And people are like, "What? You can't cross the street by myself?" Like I dissociate, so like I can get hit by a car. So no, I can't cross the street by myself. And then like my dad does it like instinctively, like he'll like grab my hand, and I sometimes I get upset and I'm like, leave me alone, like because I try to be like as independent as possible.
sure, sure.
I do have a caregiver, and I can't like always manage my meds by myself. I do need help with that.
Okay.
Um, so there are things that I should be able to do, but I can't, and because I don't know if you know this, but I do have developmental delays, and you know sometimes people like trolls online, you know, they're like, oh well, autistic people are retarded or slow, and I'm just like, well, you do know that developmentally delayed doesn't mean that you're stupid. It just means that you're delayed. So I'm like, so you're calling us stupid, but you don't know what developmentally delayed means. Okay,
Yeah.
but
Wow.
yeah, that people sometimes can be a lot.
I can imagine, especially if you gain any kind of esteem and are like yourself in the spotlight, people kind of know your name. I'm sure you get all kind of people, reaching out.
Yeah, like someone like DM'd me on Instagram, somebody who wasn't even following me, so he's a troll. But he was like, "Why do autistic people always brag about being autistic?" And I didn't answer him. I just blocked him. But so since when is being proud of who you are bragging? Like
Right.
you have to stand up for yourself. Like if you're not proud of yourself, nobody else is going to be proud of you. So
Mhm.
like I was just like the audacity for him to come in my DMs. He doesn't even follow me. So how did you even like why are you bothering me?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, don't you have something else better to do with your life? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm like, all right.
Oh, well, we have just a short time together in this discussion of being autistic and proud, which you very well should be. And one of my last questions is what is one myth or stereotype about autism that you would like to debunk right now?
That black girls don't get autism.
Ooh, wee. Okay. Snap, snap. Yeah, let's say that. Wow. Okay. Well, now for our audience who might not be familiar with that concept, please let us know what you mean by that.
Well, like a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, you don't look autistic," and I'm always like, "Well, what am I supposed to look like?" And then, you know, people have said to me, "I didn't know that black girls could be autistic." You know, they said they knew black boys could be autistic, but they said, you know, black girls, well, you know, you can be autistic. But part of the reason is that, you know, black women don't get the grace that other people get. You know, they're
Mhm,
always labeled angry black woman. She has an attitude, and what's
mhm,
wrong with her? Or why is she acting like that? So, it all comes down to the way that black women in general are treated.
mhm.
But they're like, I didn't know black girls could be okay. Well, you're looking at me. I'm a black woman, and I'm autistic. So now you know.
Whoa! Just poof, mic drop, blow your mind. Wow. Wow. People say things out loud. Sometimes I'm like, did they say that out loud? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
say
And
that.
another thing that's kind of weird is when people are like, "Oh, you're autistic." I know an autistic person. I'm like, "But you don't know me because it's a spectrum and nobody's the same."
Yeah, that's good. And they who that Stephen, oh gosh, Stephen Shore, that who says, if you met one person with autism, you've met
Autism, you met one person with autism.
so different, so different. Even, I mean, look at the research will even show twins with autism, genetically, how they are so similar to the core, yet they can present so differently. I've worked with so many sets of twins where one may be more impacted in one way more than another, yet same parents, same, genes, everything. So, yeah, it can be very different. And so, thank you for sharing that truth with us. What would you like to see change when it comes to autism in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see this taking us? What are some changes you would like to see in for people with autism?
I would like to see studies being done about autistic people, actually including autistic people. I've
Mhm.
seen like a few studies being done recently, but like they didn't include anybody autistic. So like you guys are just going off what you're observing. You need to speak
Mhm.
to us to
Okay.
to really know like what things are like and how things make us feel. And they're basing their research off a 30-year-old research, and things are different now. We're not living in the same times. So I
Right.
would like to see more research about autism to include people who are actually autistic.
Wow, that would be wonderful. And you say the same thing, really kind of piggybacking on what one of our previous guests, J.R. Reed, shared. He's an autistic adult who I think he was identified like in his 40s or something. And so really late diagnosis for him. But he says the same thing, that he would like to see more classes about autism being taught by autistic people in universities versus, like you said, people who are neurotypical who are just studied it, but someone who's living it.
Yeah, it's very different to be just somebody observing than to be somebody actually living it. And I think that's what they need to understand.
Wow, that will be great. And I hope if any researchers or those in that industry get a hold of this episode, I hope that you hear that and maybe consider that, and maybe even reach out to Ayanna as to be a piece of that. So, in our ending time here, Ayanna, what parting words do you have for parents who are parenting autistic children? What is maybe a word of advice or encouragement or information that you would like to share with our autistic parents or
Um,
parents?
I would I would just say to not limit your child. Don't let anybody else limit your child. And if you notice your child pulling back and putting limits on yourself, give them a pep talk and don't let them put limits on themselves either.
Wow, that's so great. That is so great because you are living proof of that, of someone who didn't have limits put on them, and you've just really been able to thrive. It's so great. So tell us, how can parents contact you? What if they want to learn more about what you're doing, what you're offering?
You can contact me on social media. I'm phenomenally autistic across all social media. You can email me phenomenallyautistic@gmail.com. So I'm around.
Oh, great. All right. Well, very apropos, phenomenally autistic as you are. We're so glad to have had you here on another episode of Thriving Special Families. Thank you so much, Ayanna.
Thank you.
Thank you. And parents, always remember, you're going to be okay, and your child is going to be okay too. Have a great one.